4.7 million. That's the number of rural veterans that currently reside in our country, with over 30% of them experiencing PTSD, along with an additional 90% experiencing related and associated comorbidities. But in addition to this, over 60% of rural counties in our country do not have access to proper mental health zones. In fact, these are designated as mental health shortage zones, where veterans are more than 10 to 15 miles away from the nearest mental health specialist and the nearest access to care. But more than just millions of people, the problem always boils down to each individual and one person. In this case, we're talking about Jerry Smith. Jerry Smith is a recent veteran who was diagnosed with PTSD and generalized anxiety disorder. But like Jerry Smith, 27% of all rural veterans live without internet access and access to the advent of telehealth and telemedicine. Similarly, when Jerry goes through a PTSD episode, which is variable entirely on timing and trigger, how does he receive the acute care that he needs in that exact moment? And on a longer-term scale, how does Jerry receive sustained access to individualized care and patient providers that would be able to help him through his PTSD and anxiety? So that's where we come in. We're VetNav. My name is Saket. I'm a neural engineering student.
I'm Hunsi. I'm also a neural engineering student.
I'm Connor. I'm a master's robotics student here at Carnegie Mellon.
And we operate by the philosophy that a veteran's worst wounds might be the ones that you can't see.
So what solutions are currently offered? So if you look at this figure, it's hard to see all the lines, but we want to focus on access versus comprehensive. So while there are solutions like crisis hotlines, VA outreach programs, as well as computer-assisted cognitive behavioral therapy, which is very accessible, but they don't really provide a long-term effect. They are very in-the-moment acute care treatments. There's also socially assisted robotics. So this is an upcoming and emerging field, but also with this, there's a lower access with this one, even though it does be a little more comprehensive, as well as cognitive behavioral therapy with a person, which may be because of distance constraints as well. So we want to focus on something that has high accessibility as well as it's comprehensive. So that's where we come in, VetNav. So with VetNav, we're a very integrative solution. We work without internet dependability, and we provide access to mental health specialists. We're also comprehensive. Oh, I realized it's not on the slide. There we go. It's also comprehensive because we want to focus on long-term PTSD care through computer-based CBT. What we're essentially doing is we're taking all of the solutions you saw on that previous slide and coming together in a very novel way by also allowing this additional feature of being predictive. Adaptive learning basically takes in all of these features that this person is learning in the moment when they're having an episode and basically makes it so that they're having specialized care over a long-term treatment. We're doing this with a social robotic called Robbie. It is a robotic-assisted veteran independence. And it also allows biofeedback to provide episodic treatment. And over time, it will learn how to care specific to that patient. So what happens exactly when intervention is needed? So let's say someone is having a PTSD episode. If they had a fitness watch, they might monitor heart rate or a spike, which might be caused by an anxiety. So by doing that, it would be working with our robotic-assisted veteran independence device, Robbie, to then kind of provide tactile stimulation to this person. In this moment, that person who's experiencing a PTSD episode is getting the care they need in the moment because that device is providing tactile stimulation or touch. Oftentimes, PTSD episodes can be really diverse, but it is common that tactile touch can be one of the things that calms them down. In addition, rather than just being a standalone device, we're also working with telehealth specialists, and this would be providing long-term care. So a person who knows this individual going through this PTSD episode would be able to care for them, tell them exactly what they need, try to help them identify what their triggers are. So in addition, this whole thing is an integrated platform, and we'd hope to have more successful patient outcome with it.
So that you know what VetNav is, let's talk about everyone's favorite topic, logistics. So we have 3 partnerships that are vital to pulling together VetNav. The first is Optum, our benefactor for today. They will be in charge of using their expertise in data analytics and specifically through the Optum Insight branch to be able to bring together optimizing the community-based outpatient clinics and being able to bring together which clinics actually are servicing which areas. That data analytics expertise that Optum has to be able to effectively allocate resources. And additionally, we have the Veterans Affair. This is a match made in heaven with Optum through their existing communication channels with the Community Care Network. And the Veterans Affair, this is their mission. They have the contacts, and they have grants that are able to fund initiatives that help veterans. So we can look to deploy VetNav through their Rural Veteran Health Access Program. We can look to help use their expertise in providing care to veterans and being able to boost the training and also the number of mental health care specialists that are able to provide care to veterans. And additionally, with their current access hotlines and everything, and Optum's ability to provide telehealth, we'll be able to bring these two together and be able to provide a really targeted telehealth system. And lastly, we want to partner with SoftBank Robotics to be able to develop Robbie. We want them to be able to look at the biofeedback integration, and they have existing expertise in social robotics through Now and through Pepper. So they also have IP. So this really will reduce the amount of effort that will be needed to develop Robbie. And if we look at the benefits to everyone involved, the VA will be able to lower costs to provide care to veterans. Right now, if we can effectively allocate resources to mental health specialists, we can reduce the number of mental health specialists that we need. And additionally, they'll learn and be able to get involved with their patients in a much more effective manner by using Optum's ability to optimize which healthcare specialists are actually allocated. Additionally, as I said, this is their mission. So this is a great benefit to them. VetNav will be able to directly service their mission statement. And we'll look to SoftBank, or SoftBank Robotics. This will be able to help increase their corporate social responsibility and also help them enter into a $1.7 billion market with rehabilitative robotics. We can also look at Optum. They'll be able to have real-time data collection of how effective this service is, anonymized, of course, and they'll be able to use this data to effectively start to tailor the providing services to these veterans. And lastly, our most important stakeholder, Jerry. Jerry will be able to increase his engagement with mental health care specialists and be able to really provide and start treating his symptoms instead of being afraid of them. He'll be able to start to really be involved with his mental health and start to take control of his mental health care. And additionally, he'll be independent. He'll get more independence from needing to be near a clinic, from needing to be, have transportation and in event that he has an episode during the transportation, that would be catastrophic to say the least. So by having the telehealth care and the Robbie intervention system immediately available to him, this will provide much better outcomes. So lastly, let's talk about how we actually go to market. So in year 1 to 2, we'll have an initial pilot. We'll work with SoftBank Robotics to prototype Robbie. We'll work with the VA Health Clinic to start to set up this infrastructure, and we'll be able to test Robbie's ability to actually work with veterans in kind of trials. Once we have a product to start deploying it, let's deploy it. So we have the training phase where we'll use our contacts with the VA to deploy to rural clinics and to be able to gather this data, but to find the kinks in the system and be able to actually start making metrics to be able to measure the success of VetNav. And finally, we will be able to work out these kinks. We will provide updates to Robbie and be able to really optimize our distribution channels and work with the VA now that we have some initial results, be able to work with other stakeholders, bring them in, and start to really scale up VetNav.
So you're proposing building a robot essentially that could detect when a veteran is about to have an episode, and through a tactile experience or intervention, reduce that moment, anxiety, whatever. Is that correct?
So in addition to that, that's correct. We're also looking to provide healthcare, I guess, across the entire continuum of care. So that's why we're integrating the socialized robotics or social robotics with cognitive-based therapy. And at the same time, both the robot and potentially an external fitness watch or heart rate monitor would then communicate with each other to kind of get that biofeedback and vitals that are needed. And that data can then all be used to help inform mental health specialists' kind of conversations with the veteran.
I think it's also important to discuss that we're offloading a lot of expensive features from this robot into the fitness watch. Additionally, these fitness watches, a lot of them already are starting to have involvement in healthcare, and that integration is really valuable because we won't need that really in the robot. The robot will need to communicate with the fitness watch, but the robot itself will be much less expensive to develop because we're actually utilizing the features that already are in the fitness watch.
And then how would you coordinate that, recording that episode and getting that back to the psychiatrist that is treating that veteran?
Yeah. So
Yeah, I don't mind taking it. So essentially by using the fitness watch, if we had already created that connection between the fitness watch and then Robbie, we would have to have a way to kind of transport that information. And we're hoping that maybe in part of the infrastructure that we talked about earlier, we'd have like a database that essentially that all the Robbies would be able to be loaded. You'd have obviously a personal database for each person, but essentially that database would work as an offline database. So you can have multiple users on end. We'd set up the telehealth with that database access, and you'd basically be working still with your provider. Would they be able to know essentially in the moment? Probably not, but they would still be able to understand, okay, you had an episode, how was it? Were your symptoms any less? And that's kind of the main goal for this. So it's very much opening a communication between the telehealth as well as the veterans, but then using that technology intermedium. Yeah.
And did you say you're using the VA's existing sort of, mental health, behavioral health services, right? Did I understand that? You're just kind of facilitating the connection to those professionals to start the CBT?
yeah, that's correct. So I guess going back to the first slide, with 60% of most rural counties being in shortage zones, we're looking to kind of optimize the zoning structure of current VA community-based outpatient clinics and kind of create a more consolidated network, kind of like what CVS did with Minute Clinic, looking at having a doctor per multiple clinics, which all have nurses. So you'd have people on site at each CBOC that would be able to do the minimal integration with Ravi, getting the watch set up, et cetera, and then having mental health specialists designated to a certain zone.
I would think Robbie would definitely be prescribed. I don't think it would just be for anyone, as well as PTSD symptoms are so varied. It would take someone a lot to need even the tactile stimulation for one. The tactile stimulation works a lot. Instead of jamming a knife into your fake foot that no longer exists, people's phantom limb syndrome. This is a little cleaner way of kind of addressing to give someone that same sense of you're okay. Like what you're imagining is very real. It's real pain. But we want to kind of give it in a little compact way. So yes, it would definitely be prescribed.
Along those lines, it also helps with minimizing costs related to clinical trials, given that we're not trying to make a diagnostic device. It is already provided by a mental health specialist or provider.
You said a couple times there's no internet required, but I'm seeing a bunch of places where it seems like internet's required. If you're going to do a telehealth visit, Rowdy has to upload. So help me understand where the no internet piece comes in.
Sure. So I guess at the minimum, the goal is to first get a solution that addresses acute episodic treatment. So within our first iteration, Robbie would be able to indeed, help a veteran specifically during their episodes. And with the remaining 73% of veterans that do have internet access, we would be able to start telehealth more easily. Over time, we plan to include router and Wi-Fi access within the robot as needed in order to help with that, facilitating that communication. But of course, that's why we have the pilot study during the years 3 to 4 range so that we can ensure that we're actually addressing proper pathology of PTSD and different symptoms.
Have you identified, I mean, I get you probably don't have a spec for this robot yet, but have you identified based on any research, even like the method of interaction? I mean, you mentioned tactile touch being a very important mechanism by which these episodes are relieved, but have you identified any sort of realm of what that looks like or
Yeah.
the effects of those in other studies?
Yeah, so we can compare. Good.
Along those lines, a lot of social robotics has been tested in children with developmental disabilities who often experience seizures or tantrums. Personal experience, I have a brother with special needs, so I've seen a lot of how immense pressure is able to help him calm down and focus, similar to people who experience panic attacks. So in the literature, it's been proven that social robots are viable candidates kind of through haptic feedback and just pure pressure, like imagine hugging a robot in a sense. Through that pure pressure and haptic feedback, you're actually giving enough sensory input for a veteran to help alleviate their flashbacks or outbursts during a PTSD episode.
SoftBank, because this is their IP, they're being able to essentially sell us the robot. They were asking them to be able to fund part of that, since partially this will be this is their product that they're going to be able to sell. Additionally, VA will be able to provide some fundings as well, because this is their mission. This is what they have, grants available to be able to fund this. And yeah, did I answer?
Not the development of the robot, but like once the thing is already built, developed, IP's owned, whatever.
Sure.
On a patient by patient basis, you're sending these patients home with their own personal therapy robot. Who's paying for that for each patient?
Yeah, so that would be through the VA specific grant programs. Specifically, the one we had mentioned was RVHAP, which specifically focuses on rehabilitation and also retrofitting veterans' homes with rehabilitation assisted capability. So that money, I believe the $2.7 million number comes from fiscal year 2020, where that's how much money they did award, and they awarded $1 million last year similarly. So that money would then come and be used to fund robotics initially, and as we work to bring the costs down, that burden could be placed less on the VA.
So again, that's getting back to funding the development of it or the actual use of it.
So that would be funding the actual implementation through getting it to a community-based outpatient clinic, then getting it to the veteran's home, whereas development would be done by SoftBank to help modify an existing design.
Yeah, so if you want to
So
speak to
Optimat, you had $2 million in there. From
We can go back to
I
that
think
slide.
3 million.
$3 million. Okay, $3 million.
Yeah. Okay, so with Optum's strength is in the kind of data analysis and as well as the predictive zoning and kind of ensuring that the databases for the veterans' physiological data is anonymized and can also be deployed smoothly, as alongside data storage as well as potential training capability for the for Robbie.